name's SK, and today I'm here with
Jack Gleason. And today we're going to be talking about self-inserts in stories and whether or not they're a good idea, why you might want to use them, why you might not, all these different things. For those who don't know, self-insertion is a literary device in which a fictional character who represents the real author of a work of fiction appears as an idealized character within that fiction, either overtly or in disguise. And joining us today to help talk about this is...
I'm Sequoia. How's it going?
So, welcome, Sequoia.
Hi.
So yeah, we're going to talk about some self-inserts in stories and such. Different examples, and them being done well, or being not done well, or everywhere in between. So, Sequoia, one of the big reasons besides the fact that you are a member of the Soyle team, one of the other big reasons we wanted to bring you on today was you have written a couple books.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And what are those books, just for the...
The first one is Harapin, the second one is The Pantorians, and there are 2 installments in the Taurian Tripoint series, which is still unfinished to this day.
But the first 2 books are available where?
Amazon. There are ebooks and or paperback books for anyone who fancies such things.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about what they're about?
Okay, well, the entire premise of the universe therein is that there are 2 planets that split apart, and one is kind of heavenly and the other is hellish, and they were parts of a balance, and then that balance got destroyed. And it's up to basically many different creatures to fix this problem, and these creatures are the main characters in the subsequent book. The first book has one set of creatures as the protagonist, and then another set of creatures are in the second book, and then yet another in the third book, and they kind of work as a spaced out team. A broadly spaced team.
Like separated by time.
Yes. Right? They don't all work together in the same room or in the same space, but they fix the problem, or they try to. For
various reasons they have some sort of calling towards kind of going and dealing with this thing.
It's creatures helping planets, basically, and thus the other creatures that live on the planets.
Right. And kind of that big idea there is that in this series, right, the planets have like souls or spirits or something like that.
Yeah, they're alive.
Yeah.
They're alive.
Yeah. Now, in the second book, we might not want to spoil too much about it, just in case people haven't read the first one, right, that they want to get into it. But in the second one, you do introduce a character pretty early on, right? Mm-hmm. And what is that character's name?
My name.
Okay.
Are you related?
Yes, we're definitely related.
So, just to kind of start off, can you tell us a bit about what that character maybe does just at the beginning, just so we don't get too far into the book for spoiler reasons, and then we'll kind of circle back to some other questions about it. So, can you just tell us what that character does at the beginning, what they're about?
Okay, well, first I think I'd better explain why she's in the story.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was going to circle to that question afterward, but yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, I can do it now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the readen that I inserted myself, quote-unquote, into there was because the 2 planets, they were heavily based upon some imaginary head worlds that I had as a kid, and I would often imagine going in there and having adventures and such, and it was really basically impossible to remove myself from that, because a lot of the stuff that ended up going into the book itself was based on stuff that I did, quote-unquote, in my imagination.
Right,
so,
sort of like invented adventures and stuff that you had had that kind of eventually contributed to the overall story of this thing you wanted to tell.
Yeah, at least in the second book, or particularly in the second book. Mm-hmm. And as to what she does, your original question is, she's like me, and she comes up with stories and draws stuff.
Right.
And in the story, she basically kind of predicts the existence of the other 2 planets because they've been separated from a planet which is essentially Earth, and she's been living on it, and she kind of intuits their existence a little bit.
Sure.
Other than that, she's kind of a sidekick to the main character.
Right.
Other than that, I don't know what else I can say without spoiling.
Yeah. I think that's fine. So one of the questions I had right off the bat was, when you were writing the story and creating the character, you said she kind of intuits that these other planets exist. Was that based on the idea of you kind of coming up with the right? So it's kind of an allegory or metaphor of, I don't know if it's even really a metaphor. It would more just be here's this idea that I had and just put it directly in there.
Very literal.
Yeah, it's pretty literal.
Let's put it this way. when I was a kid and I would imagine these things,
Right.
I would think that they were real, or,
Right.
imagine that they were real. So in this story, the character who is me, quote, she imagined them, and then they actually were real.
Right.
As opposed to real life,
right.
in which they aren't.
Right. In which they only become real within a book.
Yeah.
Okay, so when crafting this character, were there any decisions you made to make her separate from you?
Oh yeah, there's she doesn't have the same backstory as me at all.
Well, yeah, it's a very different world.
It
right?
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Maybe I should add a clarifier to that question. Clarifying to that question.
Okay.
We can rephrase that question. How does the character operate in the story in a way that you couldn't?
A way that I couldn't?
Yeah.
Well, she can turn into a fuzzy dragony thing. I know that.
There you go.
I can't
that's a
do
big
that.
difference.
That is a big difference.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask kind of more specifically, was there any distinctions between like the way the character thinks or feels or like behaves on a day-to-day that's different from you?
You could say that there are certain points at which I gave this character different thoughts than I would have had, and then had other characters correct her or interject my actual thought on the matter. She's really kind of a side character, if you will. She's a mainish side character.
So you have this internal version of yourself diverge from your own thoughts, and then have another character put them back onto the idea that you would originally have had.
Yeah, so the main idea of the story, or the main things that the story is trying to convey, aren't necessarily coming out of the character. So sometimes the character who is me will say something that I wouldn't even agree with as I sit here right now, and then some other character would say the thing that I would actually agree with, or that the story is actually trying to put out.
Yeah, and that's the same way you treat any character, right? Even if they don't do something that you agree with, you would let them do it and make the mistake in order to teach the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's a little strange when you're being cognizant of yourself, because you have to make yourself do things you wouldn't normally do, which is one thing, and then it's even harder to notice the things you actually do wrong and then try and correct it.
Right. Very much so. There was an example that I wanted to bring up as well that I think is fairly related, because, I mean, you and I talked about this when you were kind of still writing the book, right? Was an example by none other than Stephen King, who in his...
Fucking champ.
Yeah, in his Dark Tower series, right, he has, in the last, 2 or 3 books, he also has a self-insert, right? And in that story, it's... interestingly about multiple worlds, although in his it's less like worlds separated by space, and they're more worlds separated by like dimension. And so the Dark Tower is essentially the thing that holds all these worlds together, right? And his self-insert is supposed to pretty much literally be him writing the story, in that even our world is, one of the many worlds that this Dark Tower thing holds together. And if he doesn't finish the story, then the characters, everything ceases to be. And he, so the characters kind of have to actually save him so that he can continue writing the story, so that they can get to the end and do the thing they wanted.
Fucking Pompous.
It kind of feels that way, but
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. It makes sense in the internal logic. But
Right.
Still.
But he also kind of reached this point where he's like, I can't not put myself in here. He could have, sure. He could have made it anybody else. But he wanted to, bring a little bit of meta in there. But I thought it was interesting the way you talked about it, because, you were talking about how this was a story that you were kind of playing out in your head as a kid, and thus the story came from the adventures that you essentially had as a kid and just evolved from there. And so it became pretty much impossible to remove that character from the story. And it sounds very similar to something that basically Stephen King did. Right.
Well, I wouldn't say it's as revolvy around the self-insert as what he did,
Right.
by any stretch. I mean, and it's not as literal. It's more poetical.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I've worried it would be taken as pompous, even though I didn't really. It wasn't coming from a place of pompousness. It wasn't me going, "Oh, look at me! I'm all that. I'm going to help save these worlds."
Right.
It was just the fact that so much of those worlds came from my head adventures when I was younger, and I couldn't really pull myself out of that entirely.
I'm also trying to, because I've read it, and so if I'm remembering correctly, it doesn't the character also like have similar types of things going on? Like she also is a writer, or at least comes up with stories. She's a storyteller, right?
Yeah.
And she has this idea of these, these planets and stuff before she realizes the real.
Yeah.
All this other stuff, right? So it also in that regard it feels very much like that Stephen King self-insert of like it's this kind of meta going on of the characters. You can see it almost as this character is integral to this entire plot taking place. Without the character essentially thinking of it, then it wouldn't happen. It's like there's a meta loop going on there.
I wouldn't say it's quite as meta. I mean, if she wasn't there, the worlds in the story would still exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that she picked up on them for whatever reason. It's not like, even if she wasn't there in the story, then the worlds within the story universe would still exist. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's not quite like Stephen King's in that way.
Right. Well, I get that was, it wasn't necessarily the intention, but I think it definitely, even though you and I have talked about it while you were writing it and what your intentions were, when I finally read it, it still kind of felt that way to me. And maybe maybe I was colored because I'd already read Dark Tower, right? So I already had that kind of idea. But I think that self-inserts kind of create that kind of meta-analysis in the reader, no matter, especially if you're aware of it. Right? Somebody like George R. R. Martin, who has a self-insert, but it's not as explicit, it doesn't create that kind of meta-analysis in the reader's mind because, like, he changed the name of the character. This is Sam, I believe, is the character that he's... And it doesn't quite have that effect. Although, you do kind of go, God, Sam, why are you here?
Well, after like a post-awareness, I'm sure that watching or reading Game of Thrones again and seeing that Sam is supposed to be that... Mm-hmm. I guess shadow of George R. R. Martin. I'm sure that would add a layer and change the spin of the story. Mm-hmm. Knowing that nothing can really happen to Sam as long as I know that he's supposed to be George.
Right.
I mean, to the point of actually having the self-insert and saying, this is supposed to be me. Or even if you don't say that, but it's sort of obvious, I'm not sure that it's really all that much of an issue. As long as the pompous idea of my character's integral to the story because I created the landscape and everything, and if I die, the story ends because the book doesn't get written. In the Stephen King sort of fashion of, I'm really important. I happen to write myself into the story. I can't unwrite myself out of the story, so what am I supposed to do? I don't appreciate that level of egotism. It pulls me out. There's a plot. Something's supposed to be happening. And I can, from what I'm gleaning from your book, is that you're in it, but it's not about you, right?
No.
The story's taking place. You just happen to be there, and you're functioning as a plot device.
I mean, I help, I quote unquote help the main character and tag along with him, but he's really the main character, not me. So the worlds do not revolve around my self-insert by any means. I can guarantee that.
When you have a story that's about a self-insert, and essentially it's the story of your life, and you're doing it just for the sake of being the god of that world, you're writing the story for yourself. And I don't know a lot of people who enjoy that kind of thing. You
could say, and I will admit that very early versions of this story from way back in middle school and such were more of that.
Sure.
But it's not that anymore. Right. At least I hope it doesn't come off that way.
Well, I mean, that's understandable. I mean, in the same fashion, I don't have a self-insert in terms of the greater grandeur of some of my stories, but my comic book, Dark Days, has...
Gotta get a plug in there.
Yeah, I gotta throw it in there, since we're doing it anyway.
Yep.
The main character is not supposed to be me, but the main character is, in terms, a blank slate. And only through actions and turmoil do they actually get defined. And then when you finally go back into the beginning of the story and actually start writing it after you've brainstormed enough, they actually have their own character. And in the same fashion as, like, when you create the world, and everything is integral to the things you did to create it, you can't just pull that really integral element out.
Right.
The whole thing will fall apart. It's the linchpin. And it's the same thing when you write with one really prominent character in mind. I'm not saying that character is me, but I'm not saying it isn't either. Every character has some facet of you.
Yeah, you could say that.
Absolutely.
And if they happen to share your name and a lot of your personality, then they become a self-insert. And whether people are aware of that or not is really the strength of it. Stephen King's just a dickhead about it. Fucking hate him.
Oh my goodness.
That's a whole other podcast episode. I can't wait to have that one.
Neither can I.
Stephen King's so fucking bad.
Oh my goodness.
Fucking Stephen King.
Yeah, Stephen King. But to go to the definition of...
To refer back to that definition we didn't just put in at the beginning.
If we're thinking about the definition that you definitely heard at the beginning of this episode, we're talking about self-insertion in the classic sense. It is definitely a conscious and direct act by the author in order to exist within the story, but also exist in a sort of, what was it, idealized way?
Idealized way, exactly.
Which, that is fucking annoying, frankly.
Yeah.
I fucking hate that so much. You're saying you're God, essentially. You don't have a moral flaw. I know the right way to live, because I'm writing this story. Obviously, I know the answer.
Yeah.
Why the fuck would I write the story if I didn't know the answer?
The real question is, why can't, like, the characters in the Dark Tower go and ask Stephen King, hey, what do we do? Oh, you know what? I think they do, actually. He goes, I don't know yet, because I haven't written it. It's like,
why don't you just write a happy ending, you dickhead?
Yeah.
Why don't you just write that the Dark Tower stands up forever and the bad guys die?
Yeah, and then he'll have the whole, it doesn't... So there's another actually interesting thing, because I realized I just kind of jumped ahead here, but I wanted to bring up before I said that, Sequoia, one of the things you've described often is the way you think about how stories come to you, right? In that, like, it's almost like you aren't the one who's creating them. It's like they've been told to you.
Sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Stephen King also describes himself as being, like a conduit for the story.
Him and the ancient Greeks, the whole muses thing.
Right.
The same capacity in any art form. It's just that genuine inspiration. It's called discovery.
I mean, you can kind of tell when something comes to you in that way. It feels like things come out better. When things, I mean, speaking for myself personally, it feels like the really solid stuff is the stuff that you kind of look back on and go, wow, how did I come up with that? I don't even remember where that came from, because it's almost like you didn't consciously invent it. It just kind of flowed into your head from some muse juice stream flowing out in the galaxy or whatever.
Muse juice stream.
My theory on that is
TM.
the collective unconscious.
Right, yeah, collective unconscious.
It seems like it's a lot of people have these genuinely strong ideas that seem to follow a lot of classic structures and classic ideas, and it's their spin that makes them interesting for us now. But these stories that people tend to discover, the things that make us excited, make us hold our breath when we really discover it for the first time. It's that reiteration of classic elements that somehow we get excited about old things because we're making them new. It makes sense to us, and that's what I think the ingenuity of it is. It's not full fantasy. Something about it makes sense, and it has a natural flow. It's because we've seen it before, we just can't put our finger on where and why.
Archetypes.
Yeah, very much so. Not fully related to this, but it was interesting because I think music does a lot of that too, where you'll have like music follow like the sort of standard chord progression or whatever, but usually there's a lot more variation in like the melody within it. And oftentimes the music that at least gets stuck in my head is the music that seems to follow the thing that I'm expecting, and then like right at the end it does some like weird.
It's the bait and switch.
Yeah, where my brain then has to go, wait, what was that? And it like keeps playing that bit on repeat in my head until it figures it out, or I listen to it a billion times, and then my brain's like, okay, well, we memorized this now, so I don't need to play it anymore.
And it's that same quality in like good screenwriting, the expectation versus the reversal.
Right.
It's something we're expecting, we're building up to it, we understand how it's happening, and then suddenly it's not what we expect.
Right.
That's when we really enjoy it. And it's the same idea of the 80-20 rule. It's 80% the same, and then 20% is new, and that's where you can experiment.
Right. And
sometimes it's not great, but a lot of times it's enough. It's enough to be interesting again. That's why you can have the 4-chord progression and still have a different song every time.
So just kind of bringing it back to self-inserts and stuff, right? One of my biggest critiques against self-inserts, so Stephen King could still have his character exist exactly the way that it does. You could probably still have the Sequoia character exist exactly the way she does. Why not change their name? So I'm curious why not, why did you choose to keep your own name in there?
I don't remember.
It was an integral decision, but I cannot remember why.
I don't remember. It just happened that way. And I kind of regret it now, but it's there. It's written.
I can sympathize with that. I think that after a while you get married to something just because that's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to tweak things and change things because you know they should be a little bit better or you can do things, but to change something that basic to the idea itself, it's like changing the titles. Half of it's the name.
SK, you were talking about how, well, a lot of times, pretty much every character in a story is going to have some, like, aspect of you, right? Yeah. And one of the things that always came across to me when reading Dark Days was how much I saw you in Jack.
It's unavoidable. There's no way to avoid it.
Yeah. And Sequoia, I see you in pretty much every character that,
goody.
that you write. No, and I don't know.
You don't usually get to know the author.
That's exactly.
That's a big fucking caveat. That's the big asterisk.
Exactly.
I see the characters in you. It's like, well, yeah, for fuck's sake, I wrote it.
Yeah.
But I'm not consciously doing that.
No, I don't think
and
anybody
I don't think anybody really is except for Stephen King.
And me when I did that
one
time.
Yeah, but that was, to me, it seems like it was not so much of a major decision. It was more of a, should I do this or should I do that? And you decided not to.
I think it was just the being married to it, like
Yeah,
you said
right.
before, because it was always that.
It's a coin flip, but it's like, I'm going to flip that coin 10 times, and I need at least 7 tails before I can really commit to it. And even then, I'm not sure, because no one saw me flip the coins. It was 10 heads in a row. I don't know what else to tell you. God wanted it that way. It's just the relation of the human factor. Mm-hmm. You can't create a character in a vacuum and have them being completely separate from you.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to do it that way.
You can only talk from your own experience.
Yeah. Looking back, I just think I was married to it. I mean, the way that the me person fit in the worlds and the relations with the main character and it just went way back. It went way back. Right. And I couldn't quite... It's not like I didn't, retrospectively look back and go, why didn't I just make it someone else? But it just kind of happened automatically, I think. Because, I do kind of regret it now. I wish I hadn't done that. Part of me does wish I hadn't done that, but...
Why?
Because it just seems like... I'm being Stephen King, and it's just...
Well, I can tell you already. I haven't even read the books, and I know you're not Stephen King, so...
Oh, well, how can you know then?
What we talked about.
Based on the context of this conversation. I've talked to Jack about this before. Yeah. So, I'm not going in completely unaware of what we're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Regardless, it just kind of makes me cringe.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, like, why did I put myself...
It's that level of ego. Mm-hmm. Stephen King's okay with it. You're not. He had the opportunity to not do it.
There was like
so did I.
Yeah, but he was vastly more aware of it.
He was more aware of.
He was making himself way more important. First of all.
Yeah, like you said,
absolutely integral to the story.
Like you said, all the worlds, everything that happened, all that could have existed.
Everything could happen independent of your character.
Right. For Stephen King, it's the entire world revolves around
hinges on him
existing.
Oh wow.
And then the characters have to save him from a thing that actually happened to him. He actually got hit by a car in 1999 or something like that.
So he called forth his brain children to come and save him from something that factually happened to him in a fictional setting.
Yes.
He could have easily uninvented by writing it differently.
He just...
That is interesting. I've never read this, but the way you describe it...
I'm sure it's just the way that he thinks. He's like, oh, what if this happened? And then he writes it, and then he's married to it forever.
Yeah.
And does he revise anything?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
Well, in like interviews and stuff, like we've...
He comes to me.
He talks about, like, there's an interview between like him and George R. R. Martin, right? And they're kind of the exact opposite ends of the spectrum where, at least in terms of amount of writing they get done, where George R. R. Martin...
Stephen King can't stop writing.
Exactly. And George R. R. Martin's like, I might and ah over a paragraph for 3 weeks. And Stephen King's like, I set a standard of I write 6 pages per day, every day, regardless. And so, look, you're not always going to write amazing things when you do that. So I can't imagine that he doesn't have somebody who's reading it over afterward and going, what is all of this?
You guys have some bones to pick with Stephen King, I can tell.
Read it?
No,
we were talking about the other day.
I don't want to.
After
I don't fucking blame you.
It just sounds horrific.
I had to read it.
Yep.
It sounds horrific. It sounds like it would give me endless nightmares until at the end of time.
I I really enjoyed it. It's actually very scary to read it at night by yourself, to just sit there and read it.
I don't want that.
It's a really good... I like horror, so it's a really good
I do
story.
not like horror.
I love reading it. Except for when he's talking about Nazis with greased up arms, getting their arms shoved up other people's asses.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah,
First, 30 pages. Then there's that long sequence where the fat kid is in a library getting chased by a mummy, and it's like, oh, it should be scary, but it's like 80 fucking pages long. It's like, why? It is not integral at all. He's already fat and bullied. He's got his stomach cut up like 600 pages ago. Everyone gets one. He got like 6.
Yeah.
Everyone gets one horrific thing happening to them. The fat kid gets like so many things happening to him. Was Stephen King fat as a child?
I don't know.
Is he working it out?
Fuck, maybe.
Why does he do a lot of cocaine?
Yeah. And then there's the scene at the end of that book.
Yeah.
That no one should ever have to read.
I still question the legality of it.
Oh, that
Me
scene.
too.
I don't
that
understand.
Scene.
I just learned about that scene the other day, and that's if I ever needed another reason to not read it, then
it's hard.
And I didn't.
It's hard to get through.
I mean, it's not because I have anything personal against Stephen King or his books. It's just that I can't stomach horror. So
okay, no, that's totally fine. Not your bag, you know. Not your cup of tea.
I can't do it. Yeah. I will stay awake for days and days and days and days and days with the stuff running through my head on repeat, even though I don't want it with every cell of my being.
Oh yeah,
that's what horror does.
You have that issue with Reservoir Dogs.
Oh my gosh, it's so
there's
traumatic.
a torture scene that I forgot about in that movie.
I had to leave.
I've seen Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah,
for me, it's supposed to be the most iconic scene in the movie. It's the most forgettable scene for me.
I forgot about it.
I had to leave the room, and I couldn't stop thinking about it for at least a few hours.
Yeah. We had to watch TikTok Hospital to get over it.
Oof, that's the cure. TikTok
I had
Hospital.
to get some giggles in there to wash away the trauma.
Ironic or not.
Yeah.
Okay, self-inserts.
Yeah.
Here's my major fucking problem with them.
Okay, go for it.
I fucking hate them. My problem is, I don't consider what you did a true self-insert.
You say this now.
What I'm saying is the idealization.
Mm-hmm.
The idealization of the character. The character is the epitome of right in the story.
Right.
And that's my problem with it. Is for one thing, it's very preachy.
Mm-hmm.
It's pandering to me. It assumes I'm really stupid because I have to be not spoon-fed the lesson over an hour and a half or 400, 500 pages. I have to be told every time this person speaks that is the gospel.
Right.
But my real problem with it is that the suspension of disbelief is gone.
Yeah.
I'm very aware that Stephen King is writing a book where he wants to be Stephen King and he's God. He wants that story. I don't whether it came to him in a dream or is some kind of feverish thing is beside the point.
Yeah.
It takes me out. I feel like I could read your book and cover, just put a sheet over the cover and not know who wrote it and still be okay.
Because the only, in your book, the only thing that really is meta in that is just the kind of hint that, oh, well, she also has some storyteller type things and she's thinking about these things. And that,
my name?
Well, but that's what he's saying, is if
I didn't know who wrote the book,
right.
I could read it and not know that character's supposed to be you.
Well,
right.
Would that be true for Stephen King, though?
No, because he says, I'm Stephen King the author, the guy who's writing the book. I'm writing The Dark Tower right now.
Yeah.
I'm reading The Dark Tower and he's writing it.
In the book,
he's a fucking dickhead.
Yes. It's incredibly explicit.
Useless. I hate him.
Poor Stephen King. He's getting so roasted.
I know, he deserves it, and he's never going to hear it.
Ever.
The Green Mile was great.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. Shawshank?
Shawshank's good, too.
Yep.
I like The Green Mile better.
Yeah.
Besides
Tom
that,
Hanks, now.
fucking shut up. Stop talking about yourself. Stephen King doesn't talk about a self-insert of himself. He wants it to be him.
I think
he believes that that's him in another dimension.
Yeah.
And that Stephen King is writing about him.
I think the other distinction here, too.
He's like Rick from Rick and Morty.
I think the other distinction here, too, is that Stephen King got to this point in his story, and he was like, I have to create a self-insert here. This has to be a thing. This has to be the direction the story goes, right? This is a very different way in which he approached deciding to have a self-insert than what you described. Which is, the entire story came about from me interacting with these characters and doing the things. And I expanded on it from there. You were already part of the story the whole time. Whereas Stephen King was like, I'm writing 5 books, and I don't know where to take them, so let me just write myself in.
Why not?
He's in there to piggyback the plot.
That's it.
I don't know an organic way to move the story forward, so let me just put myself in here so I can dictate like a fucking what is it?
Conductor?
A conductor,
Yeah.
I was going to say dictator. Dictate like a
He's
dictator.
dictating conductor.
A dictating conductor who
Conducting dictator.
He's got a
and conducts.
string on the end of his fucking, what is it?
Conducting stick? The fucking, I don't know.
Oh,
the
is it?
name.
It's
Wand,
like a,
the baton?
It's like a
The
baton,
baton?
right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's got strings on the end of that so that the instruments move exactly how he wants it.
There are no...
Just controls the arms of the orchestra.
He's got like some kind of fucking saw level machine that keeps the orchestra playing exactly how he wants it. That man has never written a line he didn't want to write.
It's true. He wrote them.
So he never looks back and goes, man,
I
I
don't
wish
know
I'd
he
written
does.
that
I'm
differently.
I don't think he has the time. He's too busy writing the next
He
book.
couldn't read his entire bibliography. He's too busy writing the new one.
Exactly.
I would be surprised to find any writer of anything ever who didn't look back at least once and go, man, I wish I had written that old thing differently.
I'm sure.
I mean, I'm not everybody, but...
I'm sure he has moments like that where he's like, man, that could have been better. And then he takes his phone out, he looks at his bank account, and he says, you know what, probably not. It probably couldn't have gone any better than that. All he used to do is turn on TV and look at his HBO plug-in and be like, It Chapter 2 is on again. Let's watch.
I can see you know Stephen King very well, and personally,
Yes.
how many hours have you spent hanging out with Stephen King?
Many.
I don't think I'm all that far off.
I don't think so either.
Oh, of course you don't.
I mean, I've
Wow.
read his on writing book too. So he describes his process in that, and the biggest thing is that he will, once he's done, completely done, he'll put the whole script, first draft, rough draft, away for 6 weeks. Then he'll read it to himself again. So he'll read the whole book. He might make some changes. Then he'll give it to somebody else, and that's it.
And what do? Do they fix the
So-
grammar?
Yeah.
So he only does one
revision.
Read. Wow, that's not a lot.
And probably those 6 weeks, he's writing the next book.
He's writing something else. By the time he gets
Oh,
back to his other
geez.
one, he just doesn't care about
How
it.
does he do
Yeah.
that?
By writing 6 pages a day.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad.
Yep.
I can understand writing 6 pages a day, but just keeping them as is and or with only one cursory look through.
I don't know if it's cursory. I mean, it might be in depth.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm sure he
Well,
really reads it.
Yeah.
you know,
But
people have their processes.
yeah.
I can tell you that after taking a break from writing something and going back to read it, sometimes if you wait too long, you don't care enough to change anything.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's the syndrome he's suffering from, but I can write a chapter or something and then go back and read it and be like, yeah, this is fine. It
Right.
could be better, but I don't want to get back into this.
Yep.
It's been a little while. I need to move on.
Yep.
So
No,
you
I do
just
that.
take the Band-Aid.
Yep, I do that with fucking code, where I go, while I'm writing it, I'm like, this is kind of messy, I'll get back to it, and then when I finally come back and look at it, I'm like, I don't want to deal with this right now, I want to write new features, I want to move on. Fuck that. Yeah, Tom Bombadil is another one that is kind of self-insert, right? It's sort of...
Supposedly.
Yeah. I don't know enough about the lore, I'm wondering if you'll inform us a bit.
I'll inform you.
Yeah.
All I know about Tom Bombadil is that he's essentially immune to all the negative elements of the Lord of the Rings story. He can't
Right.
be influenced by the ring.
Right.
And he chooses to not partake in the plot.
Mhm.
Because, I don't know, maybe he thinks he'll moot it or something. He's like, oh yeah, the ring. I just dissolved all its power, by the way.
Yeah.
Sauron's still here. I didn't solve anything. I just neutralized the plot.
Yeah.
I think at that state, it's not really a self-insert. It's just, if I existed in the story, this is who I would be.
Right.
I don't know why Tom Bombadil has fucking superpowers. Why he's immune to all negative things.
Yeah.
Isn't he a wizard?
I don't know.
Or
He's way more powerful than any wizard.
He's.
oh no, I'm thinking of someone else.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that brown wizard guy. I forget his name.
Radagast?
Yeah, that
from
guy.
Hobbit?
I was confusing them. Sorry.
No. Tom Bombadil is not in the movie.
You son of a bitch. Yeah, Tom Bombadil's not in there because Peter Jackson thought the subplot would not make any sense.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have.
No. It barely does in the books. I never read the books.
But apparently, Tom Bombadil is like one of the old ones.
Yeah.
Like he remembers the beginning of time or something.
Yeah.
Something close to that.
Yeah.
He remembers the 3 races being created or whatever. And it's like, wow. I don't know why you exist, but it's cool, I guess. In a story about a lot of lore, I guess we should get some more lore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like it does make sense because like that story is technically about like how like mankind inherited the Earth essentially. Like it's supposed to be like pre-history, right? Like Middle Earth exists before all of known history or whatever, and then all the elves, all the fucking mystical stuff left, And humanity was just left, and that's it. Over time, we just were the only ones left. And that became real history. So it kind of makes sense to have a lot of like creation myth type stuff. And so I don't know if it's ever really been confirmed that Tom Bombadil is a self-insert or not, but it sort of makes sense for them to be able to, the author to essentially be the god of that.
Sure.
If it's a creation myth. But the other thing that doesn't happen is that he doesn't affect the main plot. He doesn't do anything. He's just there as a cool, like, oh shit.
Yeah, he's a weirdly powerful being that exists, and I understand. I can big brain understand the mechanism of how he can exist and not take part in the plot.
Right.
Because there's I forget what the blurb is, but it's something about how he can't meddle with the affairs. Mm-hmm. He can't actually get mixed up in it because of some like cosmic imbalance that he could cause. And that totally makes sense. And that's great. That's why he's immune to everything, essentially. Right. Nothing can affect me because I can't affect anything. And that's great. I appreciate that. But it's just, it's strange to have such a potent figure get introduced so early in the story and have no follow-up with that.
It is, yeah. Structurally, in a non-myth story, like creation myth story, I would not do that at all because that has nothing to do with the plot.
I would exclude that character from the theatrical release.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Which is exactly what happened, right? But I thought it was an interesting little example of maybe self-insert. I don't know if it's been confirmed, but a way in which it could be done well. But again, do you need it? No, you don't need it. That's why it's not in movies. I think we've kind of made it clear that we're fairly against the idea of a self-insert, but...
My apologies.
In the very strict definition.
In the very strict definition, exactly. Tom Bombadil isn't really that either.
I think a cameo is very different.
That's a better, yeah.
I think Tom Bombadil is more of a cameo.
Right.
He has godlike qualities, but it's not a god. It doesn't drive the plot. I can appreciate that a little bit. Especially if I have to dig for it.
Right.
It's not obvious. It's not like it's fucking Tolkien. It's not like his fucking name is Tolkien Bombadil, you know? He's a fucking guy with a weird name like everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't put it under the microscope immediately. I just wonder why this fucking deity is walking around doing nothing.
So structurally there's issues, but in terms of like the self-insert part, it's not really that big of an issue. And I think that's kind of the distinction there, is that it feels like your self-insert kind of fits that as well. Like SK said, that if you put a sheet over the cover, you wouldn't know and didn't know who wrote your book, you wouldn't know that that's a self-insert.
Well, how would anyone know that this Tom Bombadil guy is potentially...
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
That's the strength of Tom Bombadil.
Where did that theory come from? That he was...
I think it was confirmed in like letters and writings between him and somebody else. Mm. I read this somewhere that they wrote each other into each other's stories at some point.
Oh, was it him and C.S. Lewis?
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha.
So there's some coercion there. It was like a private joke between them, like Lovecraft does with whatever that other guy.
Yeah, I don't remember.
The guy that runs the new Eldritch horror shit. It's a shared universe in ways, but that's right. I can see that as being a game almost. That's fun. That adds another layer to the reader's experience.
Exactly. They get to, like, if they know the sort of things going on, or if they don't, they just kind of discover. It's another thing for them to discover. That's just like more stuff they can get out of it without it actually affecting their experience of the main plot of the story.
I'll have to read the actual Lord of the Rings to see if Tom Bombadil is actually as if he sidetracks as much as I'm assuming he does.
Yeah.
I'm thinking he probably doesn't. I'm sure every character has a little mystique. In that fashion. It's like, well, why aren't these fucking guys helping why aren't they helping them get the fucking ring to Mountain Dew?
There's so many of those.
Why don't you fucking help, you son of a bitch?
The Eagles.
Yeah.
The freaking Eagles.
The elves. Most of the elves.
We're okay.
We'll just leave it.
We're just leaving. Whatever.
We're just fucking off right over here.
Yep.
We'll just leave the entire fate of the world in the hands of these
We're leaving this dimension.
Yeah. See ya.
We're gonna go fuck off to elf heaven.
Yeah. Great.
Well, you son of a bitch. You can take Bilbo and Frodo. I know we can get on that boat. Take the rest of us with you, bastards.
It's the fucking Titanic argument all over again. There's plenty of room on that door. There's plenty of room on the door on the boat to get to Grey Havens. What the fuck?
Self-inserts are bad if you're an asshole.
Is that the gist of it then?
Yeah, essentially. Cameos are good. I like them.
I think if you have to hunt for them, they can be fun.
Yeah, it's an Easter egg at that point.
Yeah.
So I enjoy being able to pick something apart and find something new.
Right.
But I don't like doing it in the middle of the story where it's like, why the fuck is this happening?
Yeah.
I don't want it to pull me out.
Mm-hmm.
That's my problem. That's my problem with most self-inserts is that why? As soon as I read it, it's like the story ends for me immediately, and I just wonder why I'm so pissed off.
Yeah, but you constantly wonder why you're so pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, for me that might be a little bit more of a common experience. But when it comes to like, I have to put the book down because Stephen King decided to show his asshole in the middle of this page, and it wasn't about anything else but his asshole. It's like, I don't understand. How is this helping the book? How is the plot not totally detracted by this fucking asshole?
Literally.
Page of just
I
describing
just
his
don't
own
understand.
Wait a minute.
You write the story and then you purposefully detract from it to ruin my experience. My experience specifically.
It's all to spite you.
I guess. Well, it's my life. When I look at the grand scheme of all things, it's like, yeah, everyone else is here, but I'm the one living it, first of all. So when I look around and someone pisses me off, that was written for me. That was written for me to fuck me up. Whether Stephen King intended it or not, some orchestration, some level of cosmic justice is coming my way to fuck me up about it. And maybe down the line I'll get to fucking beat up Stephen King.
Oh, goodness.
When he's like 90.
Yeah, and Matthew Broderick is there to help him, and I get to beat up Matthew Broderick too. Fucking hate Matthew Broderick, by the way. If you didn't know that about me, now you know. Yeah, I don't like self-inserts in the strict depth.
When they're very deliberate. Where would we place Sam for George R. R. Martin? Because that was very deliberate, but it's also, you kind of have to read into it. Yeah.
I think it's fine. But as soon as I found out about it, it pissed me off. Maybe because George R. R. Martin's in the same class of just like, I don't know who's in the same class of the people I don't like, I guess. Just the irrational. It's a very large class. It's a very irrational list. Go to episode 7 to see what I mean.
Not just episode 7. It's all.
It's all over the place. But episode 7 is very, very condensed. I don't know. I if you look at the spectrum of characters, right? There's the characters that aren't like you at all, which have no humanity to them at all. Which I would say that at that point they're symbols. If you can't bestow them with human attributes, I don't think you can call them characters. Yeah. They might be a character in the story, but I don't think they function as one. Refer to the virtue episode. Moving from that, I think you have your standard characters that are, a little bit of you that are all over the place. Yeah. And then you go all the way to the opposite end of those self-inserts. And then there's the little know-nothing characters which are spread all over the place, and there's cameos, background people who don't fucking do anything. Right.
And then at the end of the spectrum, you jump a gap to get to the
Stephen King.
To the, very deliberate, I'm the god of this world self-insert.
That's the worst one.
That's the one.
It might as well be called Stephen King the Book. It's not an autobiography, which is worse. It's a fiction about myself. Can you imagine a worse book? It's a fantasy story about me being me, but being great. As if I wasn't already great enough. I went and embellished, but still past the level of an autobiography. It's beyond fantasy. It's Stephen King fantasy.
For what it's worth, I'm going to give Stephen King a bit of slack because him doing that really doesn't hurt anybody, and I would be very remiss to judge anybody for self-inserting in any capacity since I myself am self-inserted.
No, I understand. Yeah.
So there's my 2 cents about that.
You can't cast the first stone. I understand that. But I can. So if you like the video, comment, subscribe.
Smack that motherfucking like button!
And treat that like button like Stephen King, if you're me, and bash the fuck out of it. Leave a comment. I swear to God, Stephen King fans, I will respond.
If Stephen King somehow,
I will respond for sure. Leave your number, we'll call you.
Of all the things you could rage at that much, Stephen King.
It's not that I care that much about Stephen King. You think that Stephen King is on my top 10 list of things I care about. He's way down there. But right now, he's part of the discussion. And I can't ignore it. Thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah. See you next time.